Hey everyone, this is Paul Bertorelli reporting for AVweb. I'm with Jack Pelton via Zoom. Jack is in Wichita. Jack is chairman of EAA, of course. Jack, you made the difficult decision last week to cancel AirVenture 2020. We can talk about the specifics, but yesterday Wisconsin threw a giant curveball into the works by the Supreme Court invalidated any further stay-at-home orders, and in fact, almost any kinds of restrictions at all on movement and isolation. Some of the cities are doing their own, but would that have had any effect on any of this?
No, it really wouldn't. If you look at what happened in the state of Wisconsin this week, it was really I'd call it political jousting. You have a Democrat that's a governor. You got a Republican-controlled House. They took them to task on saying that the governor didn't have the power to put in a safer at home policy through the Memorial Day weekend. So they got it canceled immediately. And what the ruling also did indicate is that at the local level, whether it be the county or the city, that they have the power to be able to put in place whatever they feel is necessary to combat the COVID-19 virus as it migrates to the area. So immediately you had a small window where Wisconsin went wide open. Places like Milwaukee and Green Bay, the bars were packed from 5 p.m. when the order went in place till local ordinances shut them down later in the day. And so right now in Winnebago County, where Oshkosh is located, they've put a continuation of the stay-at-home order through May 20th with the recognition that they said they could continue to extend it. And they are now putting in place what the guidelines and best practices should be as they go into a phased reopening of local counties and the state. So while this was a incredible curveball and immediately raised the question, does that mean that everything's good and we could have AirVenture in July? And the answer to that is no. If you go to what's happening across the country and the guidelines that have been put in place by the CDC and you track the numbers, Wisconsin isn't even into phase one yet based on their own dashboard and their own data. So our decision still was the right thing to do based on the data. The hard decision we had to make was more than just the event itself, but it was the lead in and the preparation to the event. Where in May, we start bringing in volunteers by the hundreds to start prepping the grounds. We bring in a lot of outside contractors to set up tents and do all those activities, which it's still holding true that is not allowed in the month of May. So now you get into June and you're starting to get the schedule backed up and you still don't know what it's going to be the guidelines for mass gatherings of the size of ours, hundreds of thousands of people, in the end of July timeframe. So the decision still holds. The data that we're seeing today on how the virus is progressing still supports that it was the right decision. And I think, unfortunately, the condition we're in the nation is that large mass gatherings of any size, people are going to be uncomfortable until a vaccine is put in place.
Yeah, and that kind of gets us to looking forward into 2021. All the reading and research I've done on this, none of it indicates this is a short-term event. It looks to me like this is going to be around for a while. So, of course, we don't really know when a vaccine will appear or how effective it will be and how widely available it will be. So if we're going into 2021 and we're basically where we are now, there may or may not be some lifting of restrictions. Now what? Can an event like AirVenture go forward in any way with any kind of restrictions? I know you've thought about this.
We have, and I think where we're at today is quite frankly, in a wait and see. We're planning as if everything will be a go in 2021. I think Paul is, as I know, and I follow your readings and AVweb daily. I think we all just don't have enough information to understand how this thing's going to manifest itself. You've got, every opinion from it'll run its course and end up becoming no different than the normal flu season to we don't know how it's going to manifest itself, and we're going to have a tricky road forward in trying to figure it out. So let's put it this way: in order for me to get up every morning and look forward to the day, I am not thinking about AirVenture in 2021 not happening. I want to believe that we've got the greatest scientists and minds in medical profession here in the United States, and we'll get this thing figured out and figure out how to live and manage through this.
Yeah, that's
and if it And if it does, and that said, AirVenture is just a small piece of our economy that would be, tremendously impacted when you look at all of the professional sports and all the massive billions of dollars that are in concerts and mass gatherings and all that. So I'm going to get up every morning believing that we're going to find a path and we're going to get through this and work through what is EAA going to do in getting our organization structured appropriately to get to 2021. I'm very proud of the team we have that's working from home every day. We're as productive as ever. We're publishing magazines. We're working with our chapters and our members. But we took a big financial hit. And the good news is we, in the last 5 years, have been strategically planning our association to be able to handle a single occurrence of AirVenture not happening. When you talk about multiple occurrences, that's a whole different story. But we'll be back stronger than ever in 2021.
What did you envision might have been the single occurrence? Was it a pandemic?
No, it was not a pandemic. When I came on board, I looked at just our strategic planning process, and as a team, it was very clear that if you go back in our history, Sloshkosh is a great example where an event that darn near caused the event to be at a minimum shortened, if not potentially canceled. And financially, the association wasn't structured well enough to be able to handle a complete closure. So I said, if we're gonna really get the organization to be sustainable forever, we have to make sure that we're putting money aside in reserves to be able to handle whatever that issue could be. And we looked at, could it be terrorism? Could it be any kind of shutdown that could occur as a result of world events, since the world has gotten goofy post 9/11, post 2008, 2009. And we have worked hard on that in the last 5 years. And quite frankly, I'm very proud of the fact that our fruits have come to bear, and we're going to be fine getting through this.
Um, so in the short term here, have you had to, as far as an organization, have you had to kind of retool things to respond to this? And what kinds of things are you doing?
We're right now, we had access to the PPP program, so we're able to keep full employment and people are working normal jobs. What we have to look at is through our rest of our fiscal year is some of the other revenue opportunities that we aren't going to have advantage of. Our facilities are used year round. We have a museum, we have a lot of events, we host a lot of different things on the grounds. So we're in a replanning stage to look at where we're going to shed costs and what does that new plan look like for this coming fiscal year. And we'll get through that by the end of June timeframe. And hopefully we'll start seeing some of the revenue coming back before the year is out.
And what is the status of some of those activities? For example, the museum, is it open on a limited basis or not open at all?
No, it got shut down in March when we had to send everybody home because we're a non-essential business. We're looking at opening it not to school groups, but be able to open it to the public in limited access to the museum itself. We're hoping in the July timeframe if things start continuing as they are. The Wisconsin stay-at-home order, if it were to have stayed in place, that would have been under the phase 1 guidelines. You can bring in 10 people. Phase 2, you could bring in 50 or more people. So we're going to adhere to those policies, and we've got sanitization protocols in place. We have protocols for when we all come back to the office week after next with masks and taking our temperature and all those normal kinds of things. So we've got everything in place to get back to whatever this new norm pans out to be. So we'll bring back the museum, I think, later in the year. As we get through the different phases, we'll be able to have weddings and other kinds of events, but they're just not of the magnitude of hundreds of thousands of people kind of events. They're literally just hundreds of people.
Yeah, and speaking of that, and it kind of relates to what companies like Disney and the sports franchise are doing. Is there a way to run AirVenture with that extraordinary sanitization available, requirement to use masks, say, or hand washing or hand sanitizers? Is that a doable thing?
We looked hard at that, Paul, and if to answer it today, right now, we don't have a solution that would let you feel assured you could do that. There are so many people and there's so many touch points. If you look at, for example, just our shower houses and the campgrounds, the porta potties, the food courts, to be able to stay ahead of the types and sizes of people that we have, we believe that it was almost, or that it is currently not doable. I mean, you think about a a porta potty. I mean, you would have to sanitize after every use.
Yeah, it does seem totally impractical unless the show were, I can't imagine how it's reorganized to work without putting an impossible burden on the volunteers and the people who run it. So basically what you're saying is it really is going to require a vaccine or some other intervention here before this can go forward.
It would, and the other side of that scenario, if you do scenario planning and you look at all sides of this, would be, you know, do you have something that is significantly different than what we've had in the past? I mean, that would be, I would say, the worst case is not having it, but is there a way that you have to actually limit crowd sizes, which certainly changes the whole dynamic of where we are today? It may look more like what it was in Rockford.
Well, it could be also that the corral self-limits, which I think would have happened this year if it had gone forward. I think a large number of people just would not be comfortable attending.
No, I received hundreds of letters from volunteers and members, and a large portion, especially those who feel they're at risk, said that while they commend the decision, they themselves would have already come to the conclusion that this would be the year to sit it out. That based on underlying health issues or age, that it would just not be smart for them to be in a putting themselves in that kind of position. We had volunteers that felt that way. We had numbers of exhibitors who had said, "We're not coming," because they have the problem of putting their employees in harm's way, and so they have a whole host of other issues relative to the legal issues of, am I going to make my employee go stand in a booth that we can't assure proper sanitization, or if, are they going to have to wear masks? Are they going to have to wear gloves? What's really going on? They say that's just not something we're willing to take on.
Has the reaction support for EAA been supported?
It has been. I think it's the feeling we all have at EA ourselves, which is, I can't imagine a summer in my lifetime from when I was a kid coming from Southern California to Oshkosh with my dad. Every summer, July is all about getting together with your aviation family, and it's the depression and sadness of, oh my goodness, this isn't happening this year. Hard to imagine, how am I going to fill that void? With the recognition on the other side of people saying, well, they're saying that, they're also saying it just shouldn't have happened. It wasn't the right thing to do with the state of this virus and where we're at. So people have been very, very supportive in that regard. You get into the issues of people challenging, is this a real pandemic or not a pandemic? And I'm sorry, you can't deny that we got a problem here.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and you can't deny the responsibility I have in not wanting to put people in harm's way. I mean, it could be the worst thing that ever happened if our event becomes the first big public event, and and people are harmed as a result of it. I just can't live with myself over that.
No, and I'm glad it was you making the decision, not me. And I said as much because it is a very difficult decision, and if you go forward with this, the results could be absolutely disastrous, and
Yes, they could.
it'd be almost unrecoverable in some ways.
Yep. And we have a brand, we have a reputation, we stand for something, and I hold EA in the holding to the highest levels, and I certainly don't think that EA as an association would ever want to minimize those standards or sacrifice them.
Now I'll ask you to put on your opinion hat and look into the crystal ball a little bit for general aviation, aviation in general. Uh, I don't think we yet understand the dimensions of the hit here. And of course, you come out of Cessna manufacturing in the business aircraft segment. What do you think is going to happen there?
Paul, yeah, this is probably a good part of my week is tied up with friends, people like yourself in the industry, talking about where do we think this is all going. I think a couple ways of that I have looked at it, and that is, we've been through other crises in our industry. Each one of them fundamentally has been different than the other, whether you look at 9/11, whether you look at 08, 09 financial collapse, and whether you look at this pandemic. And the one thing that at least is foundational that I don't believe is going to change as we come out of this is that the general aviation as a fundamental involvement or activity or need or necessary need probably will not change. I mean, there's things you could think through that now with the concern about traveling and the commercial airlines, that those 500 nautical mile trips maybe become even more relevant to general aviation than they have been in the past. You go back to the 80s and the 70s. Remember, we used to promote best way for business travel was a GA airplane, jump in a 172 or a 182 and go Wichita to Dallas for your business needs and not have to drive or not have to go on the commercial airlines. I think there could be a potential little bit of a resurgence in that. The economy, as far as the job loss and hit to people personally, is going to have some impact. I think it will have a little bit of a dampening on the flying and the number of hours that we see flying. You clearly have had that today. I mean, if you look at the March and April numbers with piston flying airplane, it's been severely limited. But I believe that will come back. Probably my big concern is the health of some of the smaller companies, the infrastructure support of GA that make products and services. I think some of those, there will be some that go by the wayside that aren't going to be able to recover because they weren't capitalized well enough to get through the length of what we're going through today. I think all of the manufacturers would tell you that certainly while they're still delivering airplanes, the backlogs are getting smaller, and they're probably companies are going to be smaller for a little bit of time. And how do you predict how long that period of time was? I thought 08, 09 would be a potential 2 to 3 year tempering of the aviation industry. I had no idea that it would be significantly longer. Really didn't get back to production levels until 2013, 2014, or actually later, a little bit later than that, 14, 15,
Yeah.
16. So we're going to see some of that. But again, the fundamental underlying purposes of why general aviation exists have not been hurt by this. I mean, as far as bringing it into question, it's going to be based on the economy and how the economy goes and how long it takes to get it back up and going. I really feel for the fallout of the airline industry. Yesterday we were talking with friends, and with all of the industry have so many people that are involved with the airlines that we know from a career standpoint, and that's a large number of pilots that are being put on the sidelines. And here we just got through probably 2 of the greatest years of being able to promote to young people that learning to fly and getting involved in aviation right now is a boom career that for the next 15 or 20 years you could see the job market just being the hottest one out there. And that's going to take some tempering now with retirements and other things. Maybe it'll get back to not to a good, healthy norm, but not what we saw in the last 24 months.
Yeah, it's almost overnight. It went from pilot shortage to bust.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
I
staggering.
couldn't have imagined it, really.
I couldn't either. And just every day when I'm reading the aviation press, the numbers of airplanes that are sitting on the ground. I think Delta today announced they're going to retire the 777 because they just don't see long haul travel needing as many models of airplanes. They're going to go strictly, I think, with the A350. It's just hard to imagine. I have, friends. My wife plays tennis with a group that one of them's a United pilot, and he's, every week he talks about flying a 737, leg after leg with 15 people on board. That's hard to overcome. That's going to take some time to get people back. And yet you do see other flights like the major hub-to-hub flights that are packed with people. So hard to say how that's going to roll through and shake out.
Of course, the reason those load factors are so low is fear, basically. It's a lack of confidence in being able to travel safely. If you were in charge of bringing that confidence back, how would you do it?
I think they've got to get more disciplined in really walking the talk. They talked about not selling middle seats, and they talked about separation and all that. I think they got to get just ruthless about putting rigor in place that then will get people's confidence. I mean, you turn on the news and you hear they're saying they're not selling single seats, and somebody's taking an iPhone photo of airplanes that are just ridiculously packed, and you have to ask yourself, okay, I'm going to book that flight. I personally don't have any confidence right now as to what that flight's going to look like. So as a result, I'm not going. They've got to really regain the traveling passengers' confidence in in how they are going to manage it. And I don't think they've done a good job of that.
No, and I think it's a it's a little bit like they're still staggered. They haven't adapted to a new reality here, and the new reality is so unthinkable that it's going to take some serious restructuring of these airliners and routes and so forth. And I think the airlines just haven't got to the point where they've admitted that.
I think you're absolutely right. I think they're, as you said, I mean, they got a heavy blow that hit them and they're staggered and they haven't sat down and said, okay, let's shake this one off and have a plan as to how we're going to go back at it.
Okay, Jack. Well, I appreciate your taking the time to talk with us, and we're looking forward to what happens in 2021. I'm like you. I'm hoping for a vaccine, and we'll be able to go to Oshkosh and comfort and confidence in July of 2021.
Let's keep that thought and hope we get there, and keep up the good work, Paul. Really enjoy your work.
Thank you. This is Paul Bertorelli reporting for AVweb. We've been speaking with Jack Pelton, chairman of EAA. Thanks for watching.